Qasim. What? Alhamdulillah.
Assassin's Creed Mirage, aka the old code of going back to the roots. We have seen Halo use it, we have seen Call of Duty using it multiple times, and despite repeated failures and people getting essentially deceived into buying the games, it's a trick that keeps being pulled. Because let's face the facts, it keeps working. But how does Mirage stand? Is it really just a DLC to Valhalla? Is it just an attempt by Ubisoft of testing the waters? Or no, Ubisoft has learned its lessons and is trying to bring back the old fans of the franchise. Since the launch of the OG Assassin's Creed back in 2007, a lot has changed. Ubisoft has gained and lost a lot of its credibility, and is by far a much bigger and much more successful business. Not because they're extremely good at making games, but rather because the growth of industry in general. And Assassin's Creed has become arguably the main IP and a pillar of Ubisoft's existence. So yes, if you as a fan think that AC right now has an identity crisis, you're definitely right. But you couldn't begin to imagine how the senior designers in Ubisoft are feeling right now. They kept changing and changing the game throughout the last 16 years. A lot of them were unnecessary and a lot of them received very positive feedback. They kept bashing their head against the wall, used their franchise as a platform for trial and error. And fast forward to the present day, they have successfully divided the Assassin's Creed fanbase into two entirely separated polars of people. On one side, there are the old fans who appreciate the more linear and stealthy approach of the older games, specifically the first game and Ezio's trilogy. On the other side, this relatively younger fanbase had probably started liking the game since Black Flag or Syndicate or even the Odyssey. But what is my position? I probably fare somewhere in between. I enjoyed games like Black Flag and Origins, but I do understand that there is a fine line that should be walked if a company aims to satisfy the core fanbase of their games. For example, Black Flag was an awesome game that didn't need to be labeled as Assassin's Creed. We cannot keep changing the core mechanics of a franchise and expect people to keep up with it. We cannot start a story based on history and then go so far into fiction that it loses touch from the reality. And that is exactly what Ubisoft has done to Assassin's Creed. The result is a story that nobody likes to keep up with, a mechanic as essential as parkour being actually worse than the older games, and characters that fail to instill any real attachment into the players. But on a more technical note, I think it's not fair to call Mirage a DLC to Valhalla. I played Mirage for about 15 hours and I mostly enjoyed it, while on the other hand Valhalla was so shit that I couldn't play it for more than 2 hours. I mean sure, there are a lot of the same animations and assets reused from the older games, and it initially was indeed a DLC, but that's not exclusive to Mirage. Every game after Origins reused a good chunk of the older assets. Because after all, it's Ubisoft we are talking about. Their whole business model is built around huge good looking open worlds with little to no meaningful content. To be honest with you guys, I really try to not like Mirage, because after so many years of neglecting the older fans of the series, it really feels like a breadcrumb to get a 12 hours long game that was originally meant to be a DLC to one of the shittiest games I've ever experienced my entire life, expanding on a character that I don't even care enough to know about, which points us to one of the major faults of the new age of Assassin's Creed. If you are a fan of the series, you are probably familiar with the historical background of Assassins. They are a Nizari Muslim group that rose to power in Persia or modern-day Iran, and then expanded to Syria and had close ties with another Nizari government in Egypt, named Fatimid Caliphate. If you want to learn more, I recommend you to read these books. There are a lot of interesting stories and incidents that can be such a blast to read for an AC fan. Now, I'm not suggesting that Ubisoft needs to stick to the history and recreate every bit of it. I totally understand some of the challenges that Ubisoft might face trying to make a game about a religious minority that literally kills their enemies to achieve their political or religious goals. I think we do have a word for that.
Terroriste. Terroriste. Terroriste.
But there are just so many cool stories and different figures in their history that could potentially be a great founding ground for a lot of epic fictional writings. Instead, Ubisoft chose a route that is the easiest for them. Because frankly, Ubisoft is pretty good in designing 3D museums. Even in their subpar assassin games, including Mirage, they did a pretty good job with the architecture and the historical representation of the open world environment. So over the years, Assassin's Creed has made a name for itself for its superb representation of historical cities like Rome, Jerusalem, Paris, and many more landmarks. But a good game doesn't end in the world design. Mirage has the benefit of being relatively short, but they did almost nothing to improve the writing and making the story more interesting compared to the past titles. Sure, it's the most traditional Assassin's Creed game since Origins or perhaps even Black Flag. Of course, it's nowhere near Odyssey and Valhalla in terms of repetitive and overbloated content. And it's true that Ubisoft has done a lot of stuff to get back to the old roots of the game. They did a great job referencing the nostalgia of the older games. It uses AC2's notoriety system. The investigation phase of AC1 has made a comeback into Mirage as well. For those of you who don't remember, the investigation phase in AC was like this. You would enter a city, synchronize with the viewpoints to uncover the map, then have a conversation with your Brotherhood contact within the city, do very tedious tasks which had only 2 or 3 different types of tasks, then you'd get enough information about the target, and then the execution. And of course, exactly like how it sounds, it ruined the experience for most of the players. Mirage replaces these tedious missions with a variety of engaging ones, but wherever AC1 excels at, Mirage just unbelievably fails. AC1 had a huge problem, which was its gameplay prior to the assassinations, but it had some of the best conversations and dialogues, and in some cases, those lines and conversations were simply enough to make you push through the boring stuff, because it had atmosphere, it was interesting and relatable. On the other hand, Mirage fixes those gameplay issues, but casts a huge shadow over everything else, by a badly written story and uninteresting characters, and of course, lack of atmosphere. So you tell me, Ubisoft, why would I and others like me play a short game based on a secondary support character from another title? And not just any title, a game that is widely criticized for ruining the image of Assassin's Creed, the very same game that ties the Assassins, a revolutionary religious group, to Norse mythology, in a typical cliché revenge story with a plot twist directly ripped off of Fight Club, and actually have enough time and interest to develop any sort of understanding or resonation with the characters. The only relatively interesting character in the game is Roshan. In a typical unoriginal Ubisoft fashion, they try to copy AC1's storyline and suddenly Roshan is one of your main obstacles. They imply that Roshan, the Grandmaster Assassin who essentially trained and was a parent role model to Basim, always knew by the nature of Basim that he is Loki's reincarnation. Roshan knew that fact all along and deliberately hid that from him. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I honestly don't get it. How many more franchises should be destroyed? How many games should be released until Ubisoft realizes that they need better writers? They keep thinking with themselves it's a graphics issue or content issue, but take the last trilogy of the Witcher 3 wannabe games, Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla. All of these games are somewhat on par with Witcher 3 in terms of graphics and quantity of content. Heck, Odyssey and Valhalla are definitely much longer. It's obvious that what's lacking here is the writing and the quality of quests and the characters. But Ubisoft senior figures have just locked up themselves inside an echo chamber of itself, and the franchise is so long gone that even the core fanbase doesn't really give a fuck anymore. Now in terms of atmosphere, the only way I can truly make the case for it is to show you these clips. One is a 16 years old game, the other the newest AAA title of Ubisoft.
So much, and the destination. It is a difficult route.
Were it that you could produce weapons with the same skill as you produce excuses.
I have done all I can.
It is not enough.
Then perhaps you ask too much.
Too much? I gave you everything. Without me, you would still be charming serpents for coin. All I ask in return was you fill the orders I bring you, and you say I ask too much? You dare disrespect me?
Peace, Tamir. I meant no insult.
Then you should have kept your mouth shut.
No! Stop!
Stop? I'm just getting started.
No! Stop!
You came into my souk, stood before my men, and dared to insult me? None. Leave the body. Let this be a lesson to the rest of you. Think twice before you tell me something cannot be done.
Word will surely
My
get to
customers
Alone.
always leave me
Come
wearing
out and spectate.
satisfied smile
Coward.
and
There he
still
is.
happy person.
Now is my
With a
chance.
loyalty discount to all returning customers.
Sniper! That man is a killer! Stop him!
Awful timing.
AC1 does a pretty good job of building up momentum prior to the execution of a target. It builds an atmosphere with a combination of music and visual effects. On the other hand, Mirage takes the old RPG route, which I guess is a double-edged sword. It does give the player the possibility of doing different stuff to get to the target, but at the same time, it's so bland and unappealing. So Mirage says it's going back to the roots, but not really. It's just a more downscaled version of a camp clearing that existed in the last 3 games. In other words, Mirage unfortunately suffers from the same problems that infest other Ubisoft titles. An old cliché of a format. Release your eagle/drone, spot the enemies, clear the camps, unlock stuff by looting the camps, move on to the next objective. So it doesn't really matter if it's an eagle, a crow or a fucking MQ-1 Reaper. It's essentially the same blades, the same mechanics, just in different aesthetics and edges. Now, as far as gameplay goes, I don't really have much to add. The gameplay loop is fun in the beginning and holds up pretty well until the end. It's a simple light attack, heavy attack, parry combination. It's not extremely fun, but it gets the job done. Overall, Mirage is a mixed bag. I did enjoy my time with it, but I expected Ubisoft to not waste this location and the golden age of Islam era, which happens to be exactly the time that Assassins rose up to power in history on a subpar XDLC game. And I am finding it hard to recognize my true feelings about this game, because I don't know if it is because I miss the old games and I really like the Middle Eastern setting, or Mirage is actually a good game. All I know is Assassin's Creed was one hell of a titan among other franchises. I have no idea how Ubisoft will try to save this franchise. Will it ever be as great as it used to be? Will it ever actually tell the story of Assassins instead of being a tour around the world? I guess waiting is all we can do. Thanks for watching, everybody. Remember to subscribe and comment your opinion, and be seeing ya.